And I know Andrew Bailey spoke about food price apocalypse. No, I would say it's a currency apocalypse. It's an apocalypse of his currency that he issues or over issued. Tuesday, May 17th, 2022, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I usually don't like to give warnings. I don't like to sound alarmist, but in this case, I have to. Uh, I think Britain is under threat from the Bank of England and the government, of course, because they work together. They're leading this country to ruin, and that will mean pensioners going without. That will mean the general public, the majority of the people at the bottom of the economic ladder going without. And why is that? Well, because of the inflation that they have created. And we saw yesterday Andrew Bailey and his cohorts from the Bank of England in front of Parliament blaming everyone and everything except themselves for inflation. So I want to show you that that's not the case, and that people were trying to warn against this 2 years ago. I've been warning against this since '08. Yes, it's taken a long time, but all the QE or money printing is coming home to roost. And we're going to focus on Governor Bailey, but I have to say, all the people at the Bank of England, all the people in academia, in the economics profession at the top, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So this is not a personal attack on Bailey, because if it had been another person in charge, that person would have done exactly the same thing, I would say. So I wanted to look back at an interview that I remembered from a couple of years ago, where Andrew Bailey was trying to justify all the extremist, and I call it extremist, all this monetary policy that the Bank of England and other central banks. This, by the way, applies for all the major central banks of the world, for all Western central banks especially. And yes, he was trying to justify 200 billion of QE, zero rates. And don't forget, he even did another 200 billion. This is an interview from May 15th, 2020. So exactly 2 years ago, with a reporter from the FT who was very soft on him, didn't really question him, a guy by the name of Chris Giles. So what I'm going to do here is play clips of that interview. And before I play the clips, I will give you a summary of what Bailey said and what I think. And I will also put a link to the whole interview up in the cards and below in the description. But I think this is really serious. They've lost control. The Bank of England has lost control of inflation totally. And you'll see why. So, as I said, the interview was from May 15th, 2020. The first clip that I have, Bailey euphemistically calls bailing out massive government borrowing as stabilizing the market. He doesn't call it that monetization, or as he calls it, monetary financing. So he's trying to justify really bailing out the government by saying that he's stabilizing the markets. So let's listen to that clip.
And it is important because, of course, at this point, we know that there is going to be a very substantial increase in the immediate issuance of debt, like of government debt. And we knew that that was going to strain the capacity of the market in the short term. And we knew that we had to play a role both in terms of stabilizing the markets across the board, and enabling the the shock through the issuance of government debt to be absorbed. And that was, for me, a very important part of it.
So he also says that inflation will just about return to target. And what's the target? 2%. And he calls it by the end of the horizon. And yesterday, of course, they were blaming COVID for inflation. They were blaming the Ukraine crisis. And don't forget, in May 2020, you already had COVID, you already had lockdowns, and I wanted to show you a chart of retail price index, or RPI, which is really what we should look at for inflation, not the CPI. CPI doesn't show the rise in council tax or rents. So as you can see here from this chart, inflation, or RPI, started picking up last year around May time. And by the beginning of this year, it was above 7%, even 8%. That's before anything happened in the Ukraine. So they'd had lost control of it already. So I just wanted to show you that. And he also says, we are not looking at a situation where inflation is rising sharply beyond target. So he's been completely wrong, of course, because target is 2%.
Now, all of that then had to be in the context of the inflation target and obviously what goes with that, which is the framework and the independence of the bank. As you can see in the scenario that we put together, the inflation profile has inflation dropping pretty much to zero. And of course, a big point behind that is the oil price. And it then, just about comes back to target on that scenario by the end of the horizon. So we're not looking at a situation where inflation is rising, sharply beyond the target.
So a year after he gave this interview, RPI was already above 3. It was at 3.3% by the middle of last year. And then, of course, at the end of the interview, Chris Giles actually has questions from the audience, which is interesting. One of the questions is the monetary stimulus, or the money printing, zero rates, is that going to bring in a rapid rise in inflation? And it was a very good question. And of course, Andrew Bailey says no, and he justifies it by saying that economists now have a new model that the equilibrium interest rate is a lot lower, so he doesn't see inflation rising.
Okay, we'll just have time for one more question from the audience, please. Is unprecedented stimulus going to bring on high inflation, or is traditional economic theory dead?
I don't think it is going to bring on high inflation, which isn't, of course, let me be very clear, of course, it isn't that we don't watch out for the inflationary impact. But of course, one of the big things about the world we're in, which was true before we got into the situation with COVID, was that we're now in a world of much lower, what the economists would call R-star, the equilibrium rate has come down. That's for structural reasons largely. So we're operating in a very different world in that sense. And as we were saying earlier, I don't think that we see the evidence that there is going to be a rapid rise in inflation in the current context. I just don't think the evidence is there.
Will we be able to solve any problem by getting rid of Andrew Bailey? No, because his replacement will probably do the same thing. And there's a lot of government or MPs out there, especially the Tory MPs, blaming the Bank of England for the inflation. But I'm sure they were okay with the Bank of England doing all the QE to finance the government when they had to in 2020. So don't believe in what the Tory MPs are saying. They're just trying to detract the blame from themselves. And so is Andrew Bailey and his cohorts. They're trying to put the blame of inflation on wages, on workers, which is truly, I would say, disgraceful. And as Milton Friedman once said, only government creates inflation. And I have to say, I don't agree 100% with Milton Friedman, because he wasn't against central banking, which is strange, because it's the biggest monopoly there is. It's totally anathema to free markets. But the solution, I have to say, is not a new governor or a different governor. The solution is complete reform, even abolition of the Bank of England, going back to a sound money system. And many people, of course, can't picture that. After all, the Bank of England has been around over 300 years. But yeah, I would say it's only creating problems and imbalances, huge imbalances. It allows governments to spend more than they should. And all it does, it's make us poorer. Yeah, it makes our currency worth less and less, and it's only going to get worse. It's going to accentuate. And I know Andrew Bailey spoke about food price apocalypse. No, I would say it's a currency apocalypse. It's an apocalypse of his currency that he issues or over issued. So before I finish, just wanted to say I've activated a new function on YouTube. It's called Super Thanks, and it allows you to thank me for my work here on YouTube. And don't feel obliged to use the Super Thanks, but if you'd like to thank me, you can use that Super Thanks. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel. And you can also follow me on Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.